Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. So today, first up for T&D, it is cold outside again today for some reason, which I'm not a fan of, but that's not true. I really actually do like it when it's cold out. Specifically, I like winter, but whatever, not the point. It got cold again, so I got the sweater mug out because it felt appropriate. And inside of it, we have some of my Harney & Sons Gunpowder Green. I still need to get more of this. I keep forgetting every time I put it down. So I need to actually do that because that is probably important. But that is less important, I guess, than what we were talking about today, which is something that I have been thinking about for a long time and has been sort of brought up again recently in a post, a question, a meme, a joke. It's hard to tell with the internet sometimes, you know. It is resurfaced as an issue of some capacity, of some consequence. And that is balancing your encounters in 5th edition D&D. And I say that it has become a problem again because for some reason, at least in the spheres that I tend to occupy, there has been this like debate almost of like, should you balance or not? Which I think is an insane thing to even be a question that is posed. But I do kind of see where they're coming from on it in a very specific kind of way. So let's talk a little bit about balancing encounters, why you should do it, and why you shouldn't follow the rules, essentially. So to kick things off, let's talk about what it is that actually is meant by balancing encounters. So if you are unaware, or if you are new, or if you've always just kind of thrown something at the party and seen what happen, balancing encounters is a way to try and make your encounters anywhere from easy through deadly, so easy, medium, hard, deadly, for your player characters. That said, while there are systems set up in place in the DMG and in other source books to help you balance those encounters, I think that those are terrible mechanical ways to balance encounters. And I'll give an example of why, and I'll talk a little bit about it here. But first off, the main reason that I think it is that way is because it is based on challenge rating. And challenge rating is, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be the number that represents how hard the monster is to kill, how hard the monster is going to be in combat for the party, which is great as a concept, right? Like that's a fantastic concept to have. However, challenge rating is based on what I am calling output stats, meaning sort of like the forward-facing stats that can be quantified by numbers better. So those are your ability scores, your proficiency bonus, your AC, your hit points, your attack, damage, and save DCs on any of your effects. And those are all fantastic things to keep in mind. Obviously, I think it's incredibly important to keep those in mind. And I don't like challenge rating, but I do think it is an important tool because it at least puts you in the right ballpark, generally speaking. But I don't think that it is the end-all be-all that some people do, right? So balance in a D&D encounter is determined by the allowance, essentially, of daily experience that a adventuring party is going to run into, because balance is determined by experience output from the monsters, and that experience is determined by the CR of the monsters, as sort of lined out in Chapter 3 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. They have a whole creating encounter section, which is actually not a bad thing to do, but when I was first starting to run games, I beat my head against a wall trying to memorize every single one of those rules so that I didn't accidentally murder my party. And then I promptly almost murdered my party. So, as a quick aside here, a little story time, and then I'll get into the example because it is the monster that I'm talking about. And honestly, if you know a whole lot about monsters that are weirdly statted and weirdly challenged, I guess, you probably know what I'm talking about. But When I was running my first campaign ever, my very first campaign, they started at level 1. I wanted to start them low so that I had some time to like adjust to helping run the game. They were playing new characters. Everybody involved was pretty new at this point. And I sat down one day and I went, okay, they're going to this abandoned town that is like rumored to be haunted, and they're, going to be fighting these things, but I want it to be kind of like spooky, but not like ghosts necessarily. There will be ghosts there, but not necessarily like undead ghost as the thing. I want there to be a reason why this town was abandoned and was run out, right? And so I went ahead and I started looking at the undead monster list just to see what there was there. Flipping through my books, because at this point I didn't have access to D&D Beyond, which I use now for pretty much everything. So I was sitting there with my stack of books, I was flipping through, I was tabbing things out, and I found one that was a challenge rating 1/2, and they were level 2 or 3 at the time. So they had just gotten their subclass, and they had brought an NPC with them. They were a 3-person party. They had brought an NPC with them who was specifically like a ghost hunter. So they were set, they were doing great. And so then they went into this town and they started to fight some stuff. Well, they almost died in the first building they walked into, because that monster, if you haven't guessed it by now, that I had picked, the challenge rating 1/2 creature that almost just absolutely brutalized an entire level 3 party plus NPC, was the Shadow. The Shadow is maybe the most the most obvious, there we go, example of a creature that is simply just given the wrong challenge rating. And it's not because of any of its quote-unquote output stats. It has an armor class of 12, 16 hit points, a strength of 6, a dexterity of 14, a constitution of 13, an intelligence of 6, a wisdom of 10, and a charisma of 8. There is nothing there that is crazy. It doesn't have anything that requires a DC, and its attack is a +4, while its damage is a 9. So it is all well within its right to be a CR 1/2 monster from that stuff. However, its attack is called Strength Drain, and when it hits a creature, no matter what, there is no save on this, it reduces its strength by 1d4. That 1d4 strength reduction lasts until the creature that it hits finishes a short or long rest. And if it reduces that strength score to 0, it's dead. That creature dies outright. There's no coming back from it. And so, when you have a party with somebody who's playing a character that isn't particularly strong, because they're playing like a rogue, you've got a cleric who is going to be boosting wisdom at early levels more than likely. He was. And you've got a fighter who relies on strength for his attacks. When they start attacking you and reducing your strength, 2 of you already don't have a particularly high strength score, and the third one is relying on that strength score to be able to do any amount of damage to anybody. So we are sitting there as they run away because their strength scores are dropping and suddenly they cannot do anything. This thing also has a movement speed of 40, so it can catch all of the like weaker creatures essentially. And because that is the only attack that it has, on an opportunity attack, that is the attack that it makes. So it is a CR 1/2 monster that can absolutely obliterate a party super quickly. Here's the mechanical breakdown of that. With a party of 4, because D&D is balanced around parties of 4, regardless of what the books say, it is balanced around 4, not 3 or 5, but 4. With a party of 4 level 3 characters, which is what they had there, they should be able to scrape by. It's a hard encounter when there are 6 shadows against them. None of them have extra attack, assuming that every single one of those assuming that every single one of the party members manage to hit and deal at least 16 points of damage, which is not really going to happen at level 3. There are still 2 more of them that are going to get to attack and sap strength, which is crippling to a lot of party members until you take that rest. So it is not well balanced in that sense. However, all of the numerical stuff that it has going for it is well balanced. If you bump that shadow number up to 7 for that party, that is when it becomes a deadly encounter. Not before that. When you hit 7, it becomes deadly. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit more about actually the way to balance things, because everything I've said so far is that balancing is stupid the way that the book lays it out, which I think it is. The balancing is really not the best way to do it when the way the book lays it out. Unfortunately, the right way to do it, unfortunately, maybe more fortunately, because you should know your monster stat blocks as a dungeon master, is to really, really do your research on the monsters that you're going to be throwing at your party. Because here's the thing, right? While this is one example of the too much power for its challenge rating kind of thing, there are plenty of examples of the too little power for their challenge rating kind of thing. And so you as a dungeon master, unfortunately, the only real way to balance is to learn your party. Check it on an encounter builder, on a balance calculator, whatever you want to do. Check it to make sure that you are not going to absolutely stomp them immediately, or that it won't be too easy if, you know, they come out swinging and do a lot of good damage. Every once in a while, I will even run maybe the first 2 or 3 rounds of combat on paper just to see if what I am doing is going to have the impact that I want it to. If I want them to feel like super, super strong, then yeah, they should be able to roll rise to it. If I want them to be sort of terrified of this thing, yeah, then it's a problem. But unfortunately, or fortunately, again, kind of depends how you look at it, the only real way to balance an encounter is for you, the dungeon master, to go in, hand select everything very, very carefully, do a little bit of extra math, and figure it out. Because the part of balance that the book simply cannot account for is the fact that your party members are your party members. Your player characters are your player characters. There is that old saying that no plan ever survives contact with the enemy. I think that's the way the saying goes, at least. The same thing goes for all of your encounters, ever. Ever. There is nothing in the books that can tell you how your player characters are going to react. And honestly, there shouldn't be, right? Like, there's no reason for that. But the other thing with it is, there is nothing in the books that helps you account for the amount of damage and the amount of resilience that your player characters might have, because so much of that is determined by the dice. Now, in my home game, I'm going to use this one example because it seems to be good. Not the game where I almost murdered all of them immediately. This other game that I've been running for several years now. I've gotten to learn that party very, very well. I know what I can do. Honestly, I can even somewhat build encounters on the fly for them. They're really high level now, so it's a lot more difficult. But I can build encounters more or less on the fly for them because I know what sort of stuff they can do. But I have given them a series of magic items as well to boost them to be realistically significantly more powerful than their level. And that's kind of part of the thing. The balance rules in the DMG and in other books do not account for the power level of the characters. They don't account for the characters having magic items. They don't account for the characters having pretty much anything, which makes it a lot less useful for those campaigns where they are using a lot of higher level magic items. I have homebrewed essentially god weapons, vestiges of divergence type things. They're kind of like legacy weapons for my players, and each of them has one of them now. One of them, the barbarians, has a +3 bonus to attack and damage rolls, in addition to doing an additional d6 of fire damage as a great sword. So it is one of those things where she is automatically going to be doing more damage than a barbarian at the same level with the same sword that isn't magical. And that is not accounted for by nature of the books. There is no way for the books to account for the synergy that your party might have with itself, the way that they might buff or debuff themselves or enemies. So you have to just learn it. And it sucks that that is the answer to it, but you have to just learn the way that your party operates, the things that they go for, the things that they want to do, because There is no real better way to actually do it than to just be in touch and in tune with how your party sort of operates. If they break from their normal patterns, however, you might need to make some changes on the fly, because they might be shooting themselves in the foot, or they might be suddenly massively overpowered because they are working very well together out of nowhere all of a sudden. So the unfortunate thing is that balance in D&D is both a lie and very important. And I hate it. I hate that that's the way that it is, but I also really kind of love it because it does force you to be as in touch as possible with those players and those characters. And that is, I think, a super valuable thing, because it makes you more invested almost in the characters in the game and in the story that's being told. Not that you as the Dungeon Master shouldn't be already. But this is also good advice for people who want to get into DMing. I will say, if you are going to be running for a new party or a low-level party, go with the challenge rating calculator and err on the side of caution, because it is way easier to come back from simply having not enough challenge in something than having way too much. You can always add something in, like maybe there's another guy hiding in the bushes or something like that, but it's very difficult to come back if you have just too much going on. And you really kind of do have to rely on that early challenge rating for those low-level games, because of the fact that they are going to be more mechanically close to the books and the numbers at that point, because they don't necessarily have all of the magic that is going to be making it impossible for you to really deal with as a numerical mathematical equation kind of thing. So, to recap, balance in D&D is a lie. Balance in D&D is one of the most important things. If they are low levels, you can kind of rely on the numbers, but I wouldn't really trust it. And if they are high levels, all of the rules get thrown out the window, and there is no real way to tell what's going to happen other than for you to feel it. Sorry. I know that might not be the answer that some people were looking for, but that is kind of the answer that I have to give you, because it is kind of just the way that it goes. But that is everything that I have to talk to you guys on that today. Moving on to what shows we have coming out today. It is Wednesday, which means that, of course, we have Dimension 20, we have Nocturne, we have Venture Maidens, and we have Trials and Trebuchets. So, go show those shows some love, let them know that I sent you, and expand your D&D library just a little bit there, because they are, everybody deserves a little bit of love when they're trying to put themselves out on the internet to share their game with the world. But, like I said, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. Thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there is a link to that in the description of this episode. If you missed it and you're one of my patrons, the first episode of Sunday Brunch came out on Sunday. It is both in audio and video format. You can watch me paint this little guy and talk a little bit about miniatures. I really, really enjoy minis, so that was a really fun one to get to do. I believe that is everything. So, once again, thank you guys so much for making me part of your morning routine, and don't forget, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.